Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Use the chat, tell us where you are, and we will start right away. So I'm Lihi. I'm supporting Chris and the team. We're going to talk today about, I know you know the answer, about Blackstart, which is a very important topic these days, thanks to all the great things that are happening in the world and all the new risks that we are now facing. So how this session is going to work? We're going to talk a little bit about the challenges, Blackstart 101. We're going to start with Dr. Paul Stockton that will tell us a bit about that, explore different challenges. You will be able to ask questions through all the session. You can put your questions in the Q&A if you want to share them with everyone or you want to get a direct answer, or just put it in the chat and you can enjoy the beautiful audience that we have here today. We have a lot of people connecting, and I believe the level of expertise is very high from what I've been reading in my registration list. So I'm sure this is going to be a very beneficial event for everyone. The ePro handbooks. So basically, we launched our Blackstart book a few months ago. How can you get it? Very easy. We have a membership program for $100 a year. You can get all our 5 handbooks. I think that's the best way to get access to all of them. Or if you want to purchase the last 2, they're available on Amazon. Also, the EMP handbook we published a few months ago. So this is how to read the materials we will be talking about today. Who is going to support us today? We have, maybe I'll let Chris to present his panel. I think you can do a better job doing that. Hi,
Well,
Chris.
hi, thank you, Lihi. Yes, I'm Chris Beck. I'm the chief scientist and vice president for policy at EIS Council. I had the honor and privilege of helping to pull together the Blackstart handbook with the principal author Paul Stockton and a very important contributing author Steve Nauman, who are both joining us today. So we're going to get really the principal architects and experts to talk about this critical topic. This will be a first in a series of webinars that we're trying to beyond just reading the handbook that Lihi has pointed to, and I think most folks attending probably already have, hopefully. We want this to, take effect in the real world. We need to get our Blackstart house in order should there be an exigent event and we need to Blackstart parts of the grid. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. As Lihi said, we welcome and count on your active participation in the chats. Lihi will also be posting a series of polls and questions for you to get your feedback. Please answer those, and we'll get a summary of those findings and recommendations from you, the informed audience, as we move forward. I want to pause for a second before we really dig into the specific substance to have some introductory words of encouragement and a call to action from our esteemed CEO, Avi Schnur. Avi, please.
Thanks, Chris. And this is really exciting, I have to say, because I think collectively across the power industry and really to a large extent across the whole societal environment, there have been growing concerns. It would be particularly cool to be able to restart the grid if one of the 3 US grids, for example, actually suffered a full shutdown. And what people have begun worrying about is if that should happen, and if we want to be prepared to recover and to restart the grid in the real world, we do have to be concerned the likely cause would be a catastrophic event. So there is a set of paired challenges. We have to be prepared to realistically restart the grid, blackstart the grid, and we have to be prepared to do that, given the assumption that it's not going to be a trivial environment, that there will be damage, there will be catastrophic effects, there will be cascading failures that will occur until we make real progress with Blackstart. One comment I want to make that I hope can help to set the stage. I think we have all been constrained, and across the industry has also been constrained in thinking about how to make Blackstart really robust by some basic assumptions about where we are with policy, what can be done, what can't be done, what changes could be made to fundamental policy concerns that could help to make Blackstart far more robust. I think a fundamental principle behind the handbook, happy to hear your thoughts, Paul and Chris, was let's throw all the assumptions aside and look at what it will really take to have highly effective Blackstart capability that could work in the real world and with the kind of disruption that we might see. So with that, I have to say thanks again so much, Paul. Thanks again, Steve, for being available for this and for doing such a fantastic job in Paul and putting together the handbook. I think by far the most extensive of all of our handbooks with very substantial participation across the industry. I think, Steve, your participation was really to a large extent leading the charge for the industry. And Chris, the job that you did in pulling it all together was outstanding. So thanks so much. And Chris, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Avi. Okay, well, we are now moving on to getting into the meat of the matter. Where we're going to start is as Lee showed the agenda, but let me just verbally recap it real quick. Paul's going to provide us with a quick Blackstart 101. What are the components that are necessary for Blackstarting the grid? And then, as Avi mentioned, the fact that if we really need to Blackstart the grid, it's going to be because something really bad happened. So conducting Blackstart under fire or in extremely chaotic situations. And then Steve is going to join, follow up Paul's discussion with additional challenges, those being resource adequacy. There was just an extremely recent filing that PJM made that Steve is going to get into that gets to the heart of this matter. And then we might, if and when we have time, we'll try to get to some newer ideas, decentralizing Blackstart, the grid forming inverters, battery energy storage systems, possibly flexible nuclear operations as a contributor. But we'll start with those fundamental challenges that we see now. So Paul, if you can go Blackstart 101 and maybe even one little precursor before that of just how as you were conducting your research, what you saw as the kind of diminishing or shrinking of our Blackstart capability that raised the flag for us that we need to pay attention to this issue in the first place. Paul, please, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Avi. And thanks to everybody on this webinar for taking an interest in Blackstart, which has been a little bit of an arcane subject, mostly of concern to transmission system operators and their partners in the electric industry, but now, of course, of concern to emergency managers, the interdependent infrastructure that is essential not only for conducting a Blackstart, especially natural gas pipeline system operators, but also those who are going to depend on Blackstart to get critical loads restored and back up and running, including hospitals, military bases, everything else that we're going to be depending on for national security, and also to save and sustain lives in extreme events. Let me give you my bottom line up front, and that is Blackstart has never been more important to the United States and partner nations, and never been more at risk. Chris mentioned in his introductory remarks that we're in trouble in terms of having adequate generation resources for Blackstart. But that's only the beginning of the challenges that we face in order to ensure that we're going to have Blackstart power restoration capabilities when we need them. I'm going to offer the usual disclaimer before going further, and that is nothing I say necessarily represents the views of the Department of Defense or the Department of Energy. But both departments, indeed across the federal government, folks are increasingly concerned by the risk of Chinese disruptions of the US power grid. And of course, industry and regulators are as well. There's been a recent summary of Chinese open source studies that focus on how to create cascading failures across entire interconnections and potentially nationwide, how to conduct nodal analysis to know exactly what to take out in order to create catastrophic blackouts. We need to take the risk of these wide area blackouts ever more seriously given the evolution of the threat. Now, the best way to counter these risks of cascading failure is to ensure that they don't happen. That is, even if the People's Republic of China takes its best shot against us using sophisticated cyber attacks, likely paired with kinetic attacks from unmanned aerial systems or other means, the grid is going to be so hardened against those attacks that blackouts, if they occur at all, will be highly localized. But we need a second layer of defense too. And that is, if the very worst happens, we're able to restore power from within the blacked out area that China creates. And that gets to me my first topic, and that is Blackstart 101, I like to call it. And I apologize to many of you on the webinar who already understand this cold, but just to level set. Traditionally, the United States, certainly in the continental United States, has always conducted power restoration from the outside in. That is, even in a bad blackout, such as the 2003 Northeastern and Midwest blackout, even when a wide area is out of power, there are always surrounding areas that are still up and running. And you can import from the outside of that blacked out area and carry electricity in to restart generators, serve critical loads, get energy infrastructure back up and running. So that's our traditional outside in restoration pattern. In a catastrophic attack by China or potentially other high capability adversaries, we're going to need to do something different. Instead of importing power from outside in, we're going to need to be able to restart the grid from inside the blacked out area, potentially across entire interconnections or even multiple interconnections. We've got 3 of them, of course. That is Blackstart, restarting the grid from the inside out. Let me quickly go through the phases of Blackstart, because too often folks say, well, Blackstart, that's just getting the initial Blackstart resource started. That's not nearly enough. The first thing that needs to happen for Blackstart restoration is that transmission operators and their partners need to establish situational awareness. Because as Avi mentioned in his introductory remarks, there's a reason why we have a catastrophic blackout, right? China has been wrecking stuff. And so the first question is, okay, what is the status of the infrastructure, sensors, operating systems, communication systems that could have been disrupted in the initial attack on which we're going to depend to conduct Blackstart? So what is the situation that operators need to account for in going forward with their restoration plans? The second phase is to establish the initial power island. So first, there's a small Blackstart resource, usually fueled by diesel, lots of times, wherever possible, hydro, something relatively small that gets up and running. And you send the power down the cranking path, this dedicated transmission corridor, to the next generator, larger, and then on to additional ever larger generators. So you can grow the amount of generation capacity that's brought online in this power island, and at the same time, pick up load so that there's always a constant balance between generation and load. And folks, this is not easy. even under the best of circumstances. Cold load pickup, everything associated with maintaining the stability of the power island. That is a big technical challenge, and again, done under extraordinary circumstances. But you establish this initial power island via the cranking path, this dedicated corridor. So that's the second phase. The next phase is to use next start generation to grow those power islands and bring online typically very large natural gas fired generators in order to greatly increase the amount of generation capacity within the power island. And again, start picking up more and more critical loads, especially loads that, for example, natural gas infrastructure, compressor stations, etc. So you can ensure that power restoration can go forward, as well as hospitals, nuclear power plants, other priority loads needed to make sure that restoration goes forward in a carefully prioritized way, with transmission system operators and their partners having really solid, rock solid plans on how to do this. So that's the third phase, using next start generation to grow the power islands. Then the final stage is to integrate neighboring power islands once they've grown quite large, synchronize them 60 hertz, and reestablish interconnections, because you love having interconnections, right? They're so big, they contain so much infrastructure, so much load and generating capacity that they are inherently more resilient against disturbances than small power islands. So those are the phases of Blackstart. One of the problems, of course, is that these phases have, at least the latter three phases, have never, ever been tested under remotely real-world conditions. There's an island off the coast of Long Island, Plum Island, where the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Energy partner with industry to simulate Blackstart restoration in a reasonably realistic environment, where they create an island-wide blackout and then actually do Blackstart to serve loads on that island. But if you're the operator providing power to a major US city, and you decide, hey, one day I'm going to test my Blackstart system, you entirely black out that city, and then you run through the phases. You can see the obvious problems of doing that, and why we're never going to have a realistic real-world testing of Blackstart. So there are some problems here. We've got exquisite, frequently rehearsed plans by transmission system operators and their partners to conduct Blackstart, but doing so under real-world conditions, it's never done. And we have high-quality simulators and all kinds of tools to assist training, but there's a certain unknown factor in terms of conducting Blackstart in the real world.
Now, Paul, let me just break in real quick, just
Sure.
to say, I think the point, just to make sure, you're saying we can't do this stuff in the United States, in the continental United States. Like, we're not going to black out a city just to practice it. Now, there is another island off the coast of the continental United States, Puerto Rico, that has done real Blackstart. The whole island was blacked out. They did have to Blackstart it, so we know that it can be done. Also, those have been very recent, Hurricane Maria, etc. We also had a large blackout of all of Spain, which in contradistinction was re-energized. But to your point, Paul, that was done more like the United States has always done power restoration. They brought power in from the European grid. They didn't really Blackstart from within the Iberian Peninsula. But just to clarify a couple of those remarks, and then Paul, I think where you were going to go next is what would happen in the United States if we had such a blackout would probably be due to some kind of adversarial condition, because a weather event large enough to take down the whole Eastern Interconnect or Western Interconnect is less likely. So what we may be dealing with is a blackout under really extreme adversary conditions. I know you wanted to touch on that before we go over to Steve and resource adequacy.
I do. Thanks, Chris. And let me say that Spain is a very interesting example because two forms of restoration, both flavors, went forward simultaneously. So there was a Blackstart restoration underway in the Iberian Peninsula. At the same time, that power was imported not only from France and the EU, but also from Morocco. So we could be in the same situation in the United States if there's an interconnection wide blackout of having both outside in and inside out restoration going forward simultaneously. And of course, transmission operators in the United States have thought about this, how to do it. But my point stands that for inside the United States, Puerto Rico accepted, not a lot of real world experience in how to do this. But turning to the point that you just raised, Blackstart under fire, as you and Avi pointed out initially, there's going to be damage from the attack that occurred. That's going to make Blackstart difficult and even difficult to establish situational awareness. That's pretty well understood. What I think deserves careful attention in our discussion today is that if there is an attack by China and the grid is taken down, restoration begins to go forward. We have to assume that China will continue to attack the US grid and specifically target Blackstart infrastructure, control systems, sensors, and communications for continued disruption. And a lot of folks I talk to in the defense community are saying, hey, Paul, we're looking at Ukraine now as a model of what could happen if the United States, heaven forbid, falls into a conflict with China over Taiwan or some other regional contingency. It will not, repeat, not be over in days. It could extend many, many months. And so when we talk about Blackstart, we're looking at the risk that adversaries will be able to attack Blackstart restoration, disrupt those initial power islands, and transmission operators will need to start from scratch and again rebuild the cranking path process and restart generation from scratch, perhaps multiple times. That would certainly be the goal of China. The second thing that we need to understand is it won't just be the electricity subsector and cranking paths that are under attack. China for sure will go after the natural gas pipelines that deliver fuel to Blackstart units on the cranking path, as well as, of course, next generation. And above all, there'll be attacks on communication systems. And I urge all of you to take a look at the findings of Grid X7, the industry-wide exercise that occurs every 2 years. Next one coming up this November. The finding of the Grid X7 was that without communications, restoration grinds to a halt. It's the Achilles heel of restoration. So thinking about how to ensure the survivability of communications, not between a utilities control system and forward substations. I'm not worried about that. Utilities are doing a great job. But those latter phases of restoration, where you're going to need to be able to talk to reliability coordinators hundreds of miles away from your utility, how are we going to be able to do that in the face of sustained PRC attacks, including those that leverage Salt Typhoon and the other threat vectors with which you're all familiar? So I've talked about the difficulty of conducting Blackstart in a real world environment. Before I turn it over to Steve, let me also emphasize there are terrific opportunities to strengthen the resilience of Blackstart, starting with communications, but also looking forward over the longer term, the possibility that distributed energy resources, especially battery energy storage systems, can be equipped with grid-forming inverters to conduct Blackstart in a much more highly distributed way than is currently possible with centralized cranking path strategies. And time permitting, we'll turn to that. But Steve, I want to turn it over to you and thank you for your immense contributions to building the handbook. As someone who actually ran a transmission system, major one for the United States with critical national security customers, thank you for that and for everything that you did to lead the thought process that contributed to the handbook.
Well,
Steve, please go ahead.
okay.
I'll come back with some redirects, but that was a great segue. Thank you, Paul, and thanks for that introduction. I think it was really helpful for everyone. Steve,
Well,
please.
thanks, Paul. As Paul said, the first thing I wanted to talk about was resource adequacy. That is, having enough Blackstart resources to be able to do the job. And when we talk about resource adequacy, we're not only talking about the generators, the initial generators, the ones that can start without electricity. We're talking about what are referred to as next start generation, which generally are gas-fired resources, which are needed to start bringing up the load. So uh, the handbook covers this in detail on pages 149 through 163. But it's not only having enough of these resources, as Paul said, we have to be concerned about the fuel supply and the importance of, right now, natural gas in Blackstart and the interdependencies between the electric grid and natural gas infrastructure. One needs only to look at the uh, uh, situation in Texas uh, during Winter Storm Uri, where large numbers of Blackstart units were taken offline because of gas supply problems. Similarly, in the Midwest during Winter Storm Elliott. And this was natural phenomena. It wasn't under attack, where the whole delivery system to generators was could be attacked. One of the starting points is a report that was done by uh, uh, FERC staff and NERC and the regional councils in May 2018, called Blackstart Resource Availability. It's abbreviated in the literature as BRAV. And that was, again, 2018, and it did point out some of the concerns uh, going forward. So when we talk about resource adequacy, the question is uh, not only what is it now, but what is it likely to be in the future? So there are some risks going in the future. Economic retirements, as I mentioned, unlike the just the units that start without electricity, the next start resources generally don't receive any additional compensation. Many of those are rarely dispatched, so they don't get compensation, energy or compensation, and they're old and expensive to run. As Chris mentioned, yesterday PJM made a filing at FERC responding to what's called an efficiency letter based on a filing PJM made to revise the compensation for Blackstart units. And the reason they filed that is to modify the compensation, I'm going to quote, to prevent a potential reliability risk if even a small portion of the existing Blackstart service resources discontinue providing Blackstart service. The RTO has observed a 40% drop in the number of units offering to provide non-fuel assured Blackstart service in its 2023 RFP as compared to 2018. And in their most recent requests for proposals for what's called fuel assured Blackstart resources, they only saw proposals for some of the zones. In addition, owners of existing resources have told PJM that without certainty and stability in their revenue requirements, resources may begin to stop offering to provide Blackstart service. And getting back to the 2018 BRAV report, that's a similar concern raised there. In addition, and this is also troubling, based on feedback from generators in that 2023 RFP, new units would not be available for over 24 months. And one of the concerns is lead time associated with delivery of diesel generator sets that are needed. And that, PJM is concerned, could leave a shortfall in the interim. And as I said, with the fuel assured resources, PJM has told its members that it may have to go to its reliability backstop, which is a last resort tool, and that could take even longer, 2 to 3 years. So if you're looking at attacks, possible attacks by an adversary, to be have insufficient resources for a period of years is really not a good situation. Another risk are state laws requiring retirement of fossil resources. Fortunately, states like California, New York, Illinois. In Illinois, there is an out that if the RTO determines a unit is needed, the unit may continue to operate. In Virginia, there has to be a filing on a case-by-case basis. And New York is a little less clear. There are biannual evaluations. So the question is, will these reliability exceptions work? What's the timing? How long will the litigation take? This litigation can be drawn out, and again, we would not want to see a period of time without adequate resources. One issue, and I'm sure it will be raised, is can IBR resources replace fossil Blackstart and Nextstart? As Paul said, that is discussed in the handbook, but before you rely on something, you need to make sure it works. So I'd like to segue now into Blackstart in a contested environment. So basically, is our procurement strategy now adequate? As Paul has said, and I've mentioned before, a great deal of the units rely on natural gas, which if you have a adversary like the People's Republic of China is likely to be attacked. That can be a single point of failure. And again, look at the situation after Winter Storm Uri and Winter Storm Elliott. NERC and the regions put out an evaluation after Winter Storm Uri. The evaluation of the rest of the regions is ongoing. I think it will be available in the third quarter, hopefully, of this year, and get some more idea of the adequacy. Another issue is replenishment of secondary fuel. As Paul said, you may have to restart several times, and getting deliveries of fuel oil, for example, again, where the traffic lights are out and where there might be civil unrest, can be difficult. That's never been tested. So one thing would be useful for the intelligence community to provide a design basis threat to determine how much resources do you need for Blackstart under such a scenario. Some other issues, cybersecurity. For those who are not day-to-day working with NERC, Blackstart resources are classified as low-impact assets. These receive the lowest amount of protection. A few years ago, a NERC directing team looked at raising that to medium impact. The concern was that a very significant increase in compliance cost could result in further reduction of these generators. So that proposal withdrawn, and at this point, they're still low impact assets. And as Paul mentioned, when you have a adversary like the People's Republic of China or Russia, or possibly even Iran or North Korea, these assets could be subject to cyber attack. Last point is they can also be subject to physical attack. Back in the November-December 2022 frame, there were physical attacks on substations in North Carolina and in Washington State. These were substations not classified as critical. In 2024, the FBI was able to stop a planned attack by drones on Nashville area substations. That case is being prosecuted, U.S. versus Philippi in Tennessee. But the particular person, this was a violent extremist, allegedly, not a sophisticated nation state, was putting together a plan to build drones, arm them with explosives, and destroy substations. So after the 2022 physical attacks, FERC directed NERC to issue a report on the adequacy of its physical security standard, including whether there should be a minimum level of physical security for all substations. NERC issued the report. FERC noticed the report. That docket is still open. So there's been no directive from FERC to do anything yet. And several of us did comment about the need to have more physical protection for Blackstart units. So we're waiting that. That's all I have right now. Turn it back over to Chris. Thank you.
Chris, you're muted. Maybe we can take some questions from
I was going to say
the Q&A.
good point. This seems like a good spot to stop and bubble some questions forward.
Give some air to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was, that was a important foundation for everything, and thank you all for your questions in the chat and the Q&A. One thing I wanted to start with, since you just kind of ended with a contested environment, Steve, is questions regarding, we keep mentioning People's Republic of China. Folks are wondering why that's highlighted. I'll give a short answer, which is, well, we know they've hacked our systems. We've caught them in there. They're inside everything, and we know that's part of their strategy. Paul or Steve, is there anything on top of that that you want to mention? Anything specific that you think the folks should be aware of? Paul, I'll start with you.
Sure. Although, Steve, I'm looking forward to your comments. Building out what you just said, Chris, we know, that People's Republic of China is pre-positioning malware on U.S. grid components via the Volt Typhoon campaign in Guam, Hawaii, and elsewhere, so that at a time of Xi Jinping's choosing, China can use those compromises to disrupt the grid. This is not about gathering intelligence. This is pre-positioning China to attack the U.S. power grid. And I always like to emphasize that if China is going to roll the dice and attack the U.S. grid, it won't only go after the electricity subsector. It'll go after also interdependent infrastructure to achieve the greatest possible impact in terms of disrupting the flow of forces to the Far East, because we need to take those forces from the installations inside the United States where they're stationed 2 seaports, airports in the West Coast, and then on to the fight. China is going to seek to disrupt that, and also, according to the intelligence community, incite societal panic. And Steve, you noted before the potential risk that Blackstart will have to go forth in the face of societal disorder. You bet. That is a prime Chinese goal. And how do they create societal disorder? Above all, by jeopardizing public health and safety through attacks on water and wastewater systems, other critical lifeline infrastructures that, of course, depend on electric power. So it's very closely connected. We need to look at Blackstart in terms of partnerships with other independent infrastructure sectors. And above all, as we strengthen Blackstart, understand that we not only want to be able to effectively restore power in a prioritized way, we want to convince Xi Jinping that our Blackstart capabilities are so robust that it's not worth rolling the dice, given the costs that the United States will inflict on China in response to an attack. Thanks.
Right. You've often talked about that as deterrence by denial, Paul, and I think that's a good point. Is to say, this isn't going to work. We know we can. We have the resources to do it. But I'll let Steve. Anything else you want to tack on to the end of that answer? And I got a few more questions from the audience.
No, I just want to reemphasize something Paul said earlier. There's a researcher in the Czech Republic who has listed publicly available papers by people in the People's Republic of China on how to cause a blackout on the U.S. grid. This is what's publicly available, as opposed to what's privately available. Also, having worked on the other end of what are vulnerabilities to the electric grid years ago, we would be naive to think that China would not be able to do this. Last point, in case people don't know, it is pretty easy to obtain the transmission maps and transmission models of all three of the interconnections through simple requests at FERC and signing non-disclosure agreements. Plus, using Google to locate where equipment is exactly. You can get the coordinates in all three coordinates, including the height of where this equipment is, and it's public. It's obviously available. So one again would be naive to assume that an adversary would not have this. And this is just what's publicly available. You don't even have to hack anybody to get this.
Right. But we know that our adversaries are, in fact, also very good at hacking. So they know more than what is publicly available, as you pointed out, Steve. I have one other kind of series of questions that I'll just condense. There's just been a lot of questions about communications, the need for communications. Paul and Steve both talked about building the cranking path and all of those things, all of those switches that need to be thrown and opened and closed to create islands and then grow the islands, et cetera, connect them, some microgrids, some et cetera. All is going to rely on communications. If you could, Steve, and you also brought in the point of, right now the U.S. fleet of kind of next start units is a lot of those are natural gas units. You talked about communication and coordination with the natural gas sector, kind of needing to be an important partner in the Blackstart planning and execution process. Can you talk about I don't know where we've seen these challenges of communications, what those need to be? So we talked about the need for just the Blackstart assets themselves, we're a little bit, to put it mildly, behind where we would like to be as far as robustness. But what about the communications of allowing the operators to use assets even when they're available to start building those islands and black starting? Any recommendations there? I'll start with you, Steve. Your mute is on, Steve.
I'm sorry. Could you just repeat what you wanted me to discuss? Well, I was trying to answer a question.
Oh, no problem. Just as far as our communications, what we have now, what it would take, what to execute a Blackstart path, beyond just
there is work. There is a lot of work has been done on hardening communications and using special communications for Blackstart. And that's being done with the help of our government partners. The people in the industry would know far better the status of that. But one should not expect, everybody says, well, we have satellite backup, for example. Well, the power supply to the satellites can be disrupted, or simply the satellite can be, if you've got an attack, can be hacked. So it really has to be hardened communications. And again, there's a lot of work being done on that in a number of sponsored by a number of organizations.
Yeah, I think another wrinkle to this is just, the idea of communications in a Blackstart environment. But picture, because it's happened before, is a couple of operators on either end of a walkie-talkie saying, okay, bring up some generation, and a guy turning a dial. And that's, it has been done, it can be done, but it is hard to do. And with our more sophisticated generation now, data communications, where you're communicating directly with command and control, SCADA systems, et cetera, so that there's a different level of the kind of communications you'll need to do an effective and stabilizing Blackstart. Paul, you've remarked on this. Go ahead.
No, let me just add one thing, just so everybody knows. And Paul, I think, started to cover this. It's covered in detail in the handbook. This isn't only about communications with generators. This is, you're going to need to send people out to substations. They're going to have to check for damage. They're going to have to, because you don't want to start closing breakers into damaged equipment. They're going to have to clear buses so that you don't pick up, hundreds of megawatts of load when you close a breaker. They're going to have to clear feeders. And then they're going to have to communicate as you start bringing generators online to bring bring just the right amount of load back, so you don't bring the whole thing down again by having the load and generation out of balance. So it's a lot of communication that's going to have to be done. Last point, and it's something the industry obviously takes very seriously. It's not only doing this, it's doing this safely. It's so no worker out there or no member of the public gets electrocuted while you're doing this switching and bringing things back. So it's very intricate, and it's think of at the level of talking to every airplane every time they have to make a change in altitude or heading or anything like that. And you're doing this while you're possibly under attack.
Let me add, although Steve, you did a comprehensive job, looking beyond the electricity subsector again to the critical partners for Blackstart. Above all, natural gas pipeline system owners and operators are critical and valuable partners here. communications between transmission system operators and natural gas providers is going to be vital, again, in a disrupted environment. Because let's say that some infrastructure has been disrupted along the cranking path and the TOP needs to fall back on an alternative path. Or let's say the primary source of natural gas pipeline feeding a critical next start generator has been disrupted. Close communications, both by gas providers and consumers, in the case of generators, that's absolutely vital and needs to be conducted in real time in a disrupted environment. That's an example of the need for resilient communications beyond the electricity subsector that's going to be vital going forward.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Steve. Another kind of cluster of questions. And Steve, you started to talk about this in your opening remarks when you mentioned the PJM filing. A couple of the questions I'll kind of paraphrase, but give you a chance to kind of expand on that earlier introduction. Is a question about what kind of methodology do you apply to determine kind of how much Blackstart resource is needed in a given area or under a given transmission operator's footprint, and then probably related to but broader than that PJM filing, which was on this, and how do you incentivize and how do you do cost recovery? How is compensation determined for those to ensure that there's adequate Blackstart assets in place? Well, I'll start with you, Steve. Go ahead.
I mean, the quick answer to your last question is compensation is cost of service. And so, for example, the litigation and for all of the regions and for a long time is how do you determine that? And the particular at this point, some of the people have raised that the change PJM is proposing would overcompensate generators, and it would cost everybody more. And it turns out, of course, if you lose existing older units, the cost of getting new units is by order of magnitude more expensive. So it becomes, for those in the RTO up to FERC to determine cost of service, and we'll have to see. It's a long process. As to how much you need, there are two issues. First of all, putting aside the new situation we're in of having to worry about attacks by adversaries, there is a relationship between the amount of Blackstart resources you have and the time to restart. So, you could, in theory, restart with an absolute minimum, but it's going to take you a lot longer. And as somebody pointed out in one of either the questions or the chat, after 3 days, people start to die. I don't know if 3 days is the right time, but remember, every blackout we've had in the United States, continental United States, I'm not going to, not including Puerto Rico, have been able to start either both from the outside, and in many cases there have been mini islands. In 2003, there was an island, I believe, around Albany, New York, so that somehow ended up with the balance of generation and load and didn't go down. So you had resources that you could start. You weren't starting from scratch. And even then, it takes a long time. So, but the question is, and because you have to go through a regulatory process, and your procurement needs to be prudent and just and reasonable, having a design basis threat that has been put together by the intelligence community would help the regions and where you don't have, where you have regulated generation, the regulated by the state. It would help the utilities and the regions justify the level of procurement if they had the design, could point to the design basis threat in against concerns about over gold plating and over procurement. That would be helpful, and because the intelligence community has access to information, obviously that people don't, and they can just like for numerous things that are done for nuclear generators. There are design basis threats that they have to design to. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that at least for the adversarial actions, this design basis threat, it would be important because that's something that the owners and operators have a harder time wrapping, getting their arms around, because some of the information is hidden. We might have better information on some natural threat events, but even in that case, we're seeing events like we've never seen before. So the past may not be prologue as far as the kind of the design basis threat of terrestrial weather or other things like heat waves or winter storms, that we saw like in Uri. Let me pause because we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I saw you come up, and as everyone knows, I work for Leahy. So Leahy, any kind of any wrap up things that you want to bring forward as you've been monitoring and getting feedback from our audience on your poll questions and so on? Please go ahead.
So first of all, I wanted to say that at the end, if we all work together, and this is our main agenda, we could move things faster. So this is why I call you again to join our working group. Those are wonderful discussions. Everyone could contribute from their own experience. Chris, we have today the Blackstart, communication, policy, right? At the moment, those are the three that are running in parallel. So if you feel you can participate and be a part of this effort, we welcome everyone, especially the experienced one. So just send us an email and we'll send you the invite. It's a Zoom conversation, so it's a very warm environment to share your knowledge. LinkedIn,
Yeah,
X.
I'll interject there to say, we saw in the chat a lot of people say I want to be part of the working group. I will get the invitation out to you. That next working group, Blackstart working group, that Leahy just mentioned, will be on July 24th. And Leahy's going to get everyone that expressed their interest to me, and I will include you in that invitation for the next discussion, where we're going to we'll dig into some of the details. This was more of a public facing event. We discussed Blackstart extensively at our May 21-22 in-person meeting in DC, and then this working group is going forward to make progress on the issues we've been discussing today. So sorry, Leahy, and I just wanted to say there'll be a follow-up on this.
Words of wisdom.
This webinar series. The next public-facing event will be September 18th.
No. We still have, for the Blackstart, yes, but we're going to host another webinar about the water sector, which this topic we raised a lot today, so probably you understand why water is important for our survival. So this is going to be the next one. And yes, and please follow us on social media, because sometimes emails, we get so many of them, and then you miss events, and then I'm getting emails like, I didn't know about this. And just follow us, and then we send all the time reminders about the topics that we will discuss in every month. And if you have ideas or you want to share more stuff with us, just send us an email. We're a very responsive team, I have to say. Yeah, I think.
Yes. So we got into like the first couple of items of the agenda. We're going to continue discussing on distributed energy resources, on microgrids, on battery energy storage systems, and grid forming inverters. We're going to talk about flexible nuclear in our next discussions, because we just have a wealth of information here. It's a big topic. It's a difficult topic, and we appreciate so much everyone's engagement. Paul, any parting words you'd like to leave us with before we sign off?
Yes, in addition to Steve Nauman, many other industry folks contributed to the content and intellectual leadership of the handbook. So thanks to Dave Roop and many others who made that possible. Again, industry and above all transmission system operators, they're in charge of these critical issues. And so all praise to those TOPs and again, their partners in the regulatory and a subsector world for the progress they're making. And let's continue to support them. And also natural gas pipeline system owners and operators, because they're an absolutely vital contributor to national security.
Absolutely. And my thanks goes out to all those same people you mentioned, Paul. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you, Steve, for your leadership and intense interest and knowledge. Even just this morning, an hour or so before the webinar, you were contributing in new updated information. So we really appreciate your attention to this. Leahy, thank you for your help and guidance on the keeping us on track, and Avi for your initial call to action. We always try to end on time. We're 2 minutes over, so I just want to say thank you, everyone. All right, we'll see you all soon. All right, thanks everyone. Bye bye.